Is it possible to draw realistically using only cheap color pencils? My name is Dragos Pepina, and in this video we are going to find out if it's doable or not. I'm going to draw this beautiful frog using a set of 36 color pencils from Crayola. I did some research online and discovered that this brand is among the most popular pencils with a very low price. Now let's get started and put these guys to work. These pencils make me think of Prismacolor a lot. Their shape and texture are strikingly similar. The most important thing to mention is that they are not archival, which means they are going to get yellow in time, not ideal for soldable pieces of art. To get the hang of them, I made some swatches with some randomly chosen colors. What I noticed and found strange is that some pencils have a creamier texture than the other ones, some are very rough and a pain to apply on the paper. I should mention as well that I'm using a very good quality paper called Fabriano Artistico watercolor paper, as I'm sure it wouldn't work under any circumstances on plain printing paper. As I mentioned before, their creaminess is very close to that of Prismacolor. I also want to mention that these pencils feel so fragile that I was always afraid that the tip would break off at any moment. So far, I am pleasantly surprised and look forward to putting them to work. Because the upcoming drawing will require a lot of blending, I also had to make a gradient to know what to expect later. The application on the paper was very easy and quick. They filled the texture of the paper very well. Also, the transition between the colors didn't give me a headache until the very end when I had to blend the dark red with the blue. What got me in trouble was the appearance of wax bloom in the middle of the transition of those two colors. Wax bloom happens when the wax in a color pencil rises to the top of the layers on paper. Now let's move on to the most awaited moment and the hardest test, which is using these pencils to create something realistic. To be honest, I didn't know what to expect, but the excitement of the adventure ran through my whole body. Before I start, I want to mention that this is the first time that I've used two cameras shooting from two angles at the same time, and it wasn't until I edited that I realized that the front view footage looks more vibrant and with less contrast, while the side view shows much more of the real colors and tones. From the very first strokes, I realized how much a quality paper helps even when using cheap pencils. The paper I used, Fabriano Artistico, can take a lot of layers, being very textured too. As the Crayola white is horrible and not opaque at all, I used the Prismacolor instead, plus a white gel pen for stronger highlights, this one not being archival, and I really want to mention this as I would recommend using a quality white acrylic instead if you are going to sell your artworks. I chose to draw a frog because of the skin texture and the wet look. Out of the 36 pencils, I only used 12, so you can do a lot with just a set of the basic colors. At first, I didn't press too hard because I didn't know how it would apply to the paper, but after a few strokes, I realized that I had to press hard from the beginning to cover as much of the paper's texture as possible, otherwise I would need a lot more layers, which would also add extra time. Even now, after so many years of drawing, I'm still fascinated by how small details like the reflection in the eyes bring the drawing to life in seconds, as you can see in the drawing here. The eye and the first part of the head were a piece of cake compared to what is to come, because the other areas being full of fine details and hidden colors plus blending, which will test my patience but also the quality of these pencils. Compared to other quality pencils such as Caran d'Ache, Crayola need a lot more layering and pressure for blending, but the risk kill was worth it as the end result was very acceptable. The more I ventured into the drawing, the more I learned about these pencils and began to enjoy them. Never in a million years would I have thought that I could create something realistic with them, being very skeptical since the idea of making this video, most of all being afraid of wasting my time and ending up with a big failure. I'm really sorry if you expected this video to be a tutorial on how to draw a frog, and I'm rambling too much, but my idea was to do this cool and interesting experiment and share my experience plus demonstrate that you can make something beautiful with cheap pencils, budget being not very important when there is a lot of passion and motivation. Now coming back to the drawing, what brought this drawing instantly to life was the use of white pencil and the white gel pen, plus dark pencils like black and brown. Don't be afraid to use dark colors. I know it's scary to add a very dark color because of the thought that it can be erased anymore, but you don't have to press too hard from the beginning, you just have to build gradually by layering. Many beginners make this mistake and eventually don't understand why their drawings don't jump out at the viewer. Contrast is key when aiming for a realistic result. A lack of contrast will almost certainly result in a lifeless and washed out drawing. Because in some places the drawing looked too pale, I used a yellow to add a splash of vibrancy and to lift up the feel of the artwork. I also added as many textures as possible to achieve the idea of realism. Finally, I want to say that I was very pleasantly surprised by these pencils and I didn't expect to be able to achieve a realistic result. That's because I didn't give myself enough credit and the fear of trying something new got in the way. So, as my last thought, it is possible to create something lifelike with very cheap materials if you use quality paper plus a lot of patience and passion. This is what the final output looks like. Don't freak out, it won't jump off the paper on you. Now we came to an end of the video. I really hope you enjoyed it and you've learned a lot from it. I am posting one time a week and normally graphite, colored pencil or pastel related videos. So if you don't want to miss any of those, please hit that subscribe button and the bell button as well to be notified every time a video goes live. And I really hope I'm going to see you in the next one as well. Have a nice day. Bye guys!